All right, everybody, welcome back. It is the trade deadline, July 31st. We said last time that we would talk a lot about who the Pirates got, and that was not many people, which we'll speak about a little bit later about all the trades or lack of trades that they made this year. But to start off, we want to talk about the little slump that they went on, or as Josh describes it as, primed to get a better draft pick for this year, this upcoming year. So, as we know, what are the It's like 3-12 since the All-Star break. That sounds about accurate, but it has not been good.
Yeah, they won last night, but they lost again today.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the Pirates are now primed to get a better draft pick. They've now fallen, like they were hanging out kind of near the middle of the pack. They were 2.5 back at first place. But that quickly headed in the wrong direction when they were swept by the Cubs coming out of the break. And that was after they put the Cubs in peril just like a little bit before the break and upset Joe Madden.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to be upsetting more than just the Cubs in their division.
Okay,
But
David Bell is a very interesting person, and Clint Hurdle's out here making a lot of enemies. That's for sure. And, Joe Madden and David Bell both think that their players are getting thrown at and they're aiming for the head, but, I'm not sure. It's kind of the player's decision at the end if he tries to throw or not.
Yeah, there's two players in particular on the Pirates roster that are throwing at people, and we'll get into that later. They've kind of caused more than just the Pirates' opponents trouble this year. They've kind of caused division in the locker room, but we'll get into that to end the podcast. But right now, the Pirates are primed to get a better draft pick. The guy who I really have my eye on is the big pitcher out of Vanderbilt, Kumar Rocker.
That would be great. Like, that guy's a complete stud.
Yeah. Some people have him going first overall. That's not a guarantee at this point. So if the Pirates draft in the top 5, they'd have a shot to get him. Rocker would have to come out and be really, really good again in his sophomore season at Vanderbilt in order to be a top 5 pick. There's also not a guarantee that he drafts out, but that would kind of be stupid from a financial standpoint to stay in college another year, since he'll be eligible coming out of college after his sophomore season. So Rocker basically gives you everything we were hoping for from Chris Archer. He'd be ready probably a year after getting drafted, and he's very, very he's still young. Drafting out as a college sophomore and being about a year from big league ready. That's just the estimations, but
okay, so we're looking at a mock draft right now.
No, this is from the wrong date. That's what I was pointing out to you.
Okay, yeah.
This is before he actually pitched that no-hitter in the College World Series. So that flash has him projected very high. He really wasn't on the radar on June 10th, right after the draft, when that publication came out. So, but that's the guy that the Pirates really would give them a head start in making this a retool instead of a full rebuild. There was some speculation that at the trade deadline it would be a full rebuild, but we saw otherwise. And kind of leading up to that, we saw that the team still has some fight in them, as last night there was a brawl, and we'll briefly touch on that, but try not to give it too much press.
Yeah.
Because it was just it was a ridiculous situation.
It was pretty ugly. And, the Reds and the Pirates have been going back and forth since Dietrich hit those home runs into the river and Chris Archer had some words for him. And, yesterday was kind of ridiculous. Amir Garrett didn't even try to get in the face of Trevor Williams. He went right in with his fists. So definitely an ugly situation. And then I don't know if some people listening watched the replay, but David Bell came out of their clubhouse and went right up to Clint Hurdle and pushed him against the dugout wall. And after that, that's when Rick Eckstein hopped on top of him and started to hold him down to the ground. And I mean, Crick was going at Puig. Puig wasn't even on the Reds at the time of the brawl, but
yeah, he had been traded.
Yeah, he had been traded. So I mean, I guess a last hurrah for him, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with these two teams going down the line. We play them a bunch more, and
neither team is relevant going down the stretch. So
Yeah.
that's why I really don't want to give this brawl much press.
it's a battle for last place. Right?
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that the Pirates are in this situation because they're really they've had enough players break out and show you something this year that this club, like if their pitching staff had provided the foundation as hoped, the offensive breakout from numerous young players this year was enough where this club could have competed for first place. And it looks like going into the break that may be the case. Then they came out cold with the bats, and that kind of took the downturn. And that's where you get into the situation where, okay, we got to start trading players and take a look at who's going to be on the pitching staff in the future. For right now, Chris Archer stays with the team. He has virtually no trade value. Right now, he's at a negative 0.1 Fangraphs WAR. So he's actually contributed absolutely nothing. And that's a tough pill to swallow for the Pirates this year, being that he was one of the most healthy starters on the staff, and there were high expectations for him after they gave up three players who, frankly, are better baseball players than Chris Archer is right now, based on what he's shown this year, based on what he's shown last year. They gave up three better baseball players to acquire him just because of the name. So that kind of tells you where the Pirates stand with that. But let's kind of get into the trades that happened. You want to touch on the Lyles trade?
Jordan Lyles was traded to the Brewers for Cody Ponce, who's a 25-year-old relief pitcher at Double-A. Doesn't seem like a huge thing, but he is, number 25 in their prospect list out of 30?
Yeah. And this is coming from a Brewers farm system that is kind of middle of the pack. Keston Hiura, we saw how good he was.
Yeah.
At the end of May, he hit that bomb off of Felipe Vasquez. He homered off of Archer, but everybody homers off of Archer. So that wasn't that great of an accomplishment. But he single-handedly handed Felipe one of his blown saves this year. So that kind of shows you what type of player he is. He was the number one prospect in the farm system, but what the Pirates received in return for Lyles is a guy who should be just about big league ready by the end of this season, and he is a relief pitcher only. He is a number 25 prospect. He has decent stuff.
Granted, he has done pretty well at Double-A this year.
Yes. So he's a decent option for middle relief. Coming into spring training and then maybe shuttling back and forth. Probably a better version of Montana DiRipo.
Or a better version of Tanner Anderson.
Tanner Anderson, not a big fan.
Yeah, or Alex McRae. I mean,
yeah, I think McRae has a spot, like a role with this team in the future as long as his slider plays up. I'd like to see him become like a one-inning reliever. Obviously, it didn't work with him making the start the other night, but
granted, it was the day of.
Yeah, sprung on him.
He was probably just sitting in his
Lyles.
locker, chilling on his phone, and they're like, "Hey, you're starting today."
Yeah,
because that was the day that they dealt Lyles. So Lyles goes back to Milwaukee, where he was last year.
in the bullpen.
In the bullpen. Now, with Cody Ponce, he has been assigned to Double-A Altoona, and with that, our old friend Gift Ngope has been released. So Gift no longer with the organization. Aniel Cruz
moves up to
Double A and has a nice debut up there. And that's somebody who we are pretty high on. So before we go on to the Dickerson trade, I want to bring up a little topic. And that is, should we rebuild, should we retool, or should we just do what the classic Pirates do and pick up some weird players that don't really make sense at first, and they kind of fill into a spot, and then it kind of falls apart? So what do you think that we should do in the future?
Going into the offseason, once again, it's going to be light on the free agent market unless there's a guy that's like really a fit. We saw Russell Martin, we saw Francisco Liriano receive some of the largest free agent contracts from the Pirates in recent history. But unless there's a guy that is just such a great fit for this team, they're really not going to do a whole lot on the free agent market. They do have some interesting assets to explore trade opportunities with if they can make the ball club better. We're going to see Tucker, Hayes, and possibly Craig to finish out this season in August and September. So we'll get to see them play against MLB level competition, and we'll kind of get an idea of where this team is offensively for the future. Jung Ho Kang will kind of be playing to see if he's coming back next year, but there's a lot of infielders that are currently in the organization that are good ball players. So it's hard to see Gung coming back next year because Moran's played pretty solid baseball this year. It'll be interesting to see where he finishes at from a Fangraphs WAR perspective. But if he finishes at 2.5 or better, he'd pretty much be guaranteed a spot on next year's roster. And he, as of like a couple of weeks ago, he was pacing for that. So we know Moran doesn't hit lefties all that well. He's still a good hitter. He's upped his defensive game a little bit this year. And you've got a lot of players like Will Craig. See if he can diversify his repertoire to add outfield to the mix and be a better outfielder defender than Jose Osuna is. Osuna is another interesting name in the mix. While he's not a great defender at third base, he looks to be at least average in the innings that he's played there. He plays a very good first base. And between he and Craig, I was almost thinking like shout Bell at the deadline.
Yep.
But that leads you into an off season where Bell finishes up a great season. He's going into first year arbitration eligibility, and that's generally the point in a player's career where the Pirates will actually shop them just to see what their external value is and how it correlates to their internal value. Bell's internal value is probably not as high as a guy like Andrew McCutchen because McCutchen played a premium defensive position. So that's what we're looking at with that. And the Pirates, they have the assets. Like, they have significant assets at most of the positions around the infield, around the outfield, even after trading Corey Dickerson because of the emergence of Brian Reynolds. So it's just about asset management and trying to put the best team on the field for 2020 at this point, because 2019 didn't work out, and that's primarily due to lost leadership from Jameson Taillon and lost innings from Jameson Taillon. He's not guaranteed to be back next year.
He said in a press conference that this season is a, quote, wash. So he could be back. He may not be back.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is just because of our losing, but I'm going to go with rebuild a little bit. Kind of like a retool, rebuild right in the middle. And it's because of you have Colin Moran at third base.
Mm-hmm.
And who's playing third base at AAA right now?
Ke'Bryan
Hayes. You have Josh Bell at first base. Who's playing first base at AAA right now? Will Craig.
Yeah.
Then you have some outfield positions where, yes, Brian Reynolds has been a very nice surprise. And then you got Marte in center, which, I mean, I think that Marte might be around for a couple more years. Maybe he gets traded next trade deadline or next offseason or something. But I feel like if you trade Moran, possibly Bell, I mean, I don't know if it would be a full-out rebuild, but you need to make spots for some of these guys. Because right after Will Craig, it's Mason Martin.
Yeah.
And then you got Aniel Cruz, who may play shortstop. He may play corner infield. He may play corner outfield.
Yeah.
You just don't know right now. So there will be some spots that need to get cleared out for guys like this. Because, quite frankly, we have a decent farm system, and we have some pieces that could prove to be pretty big for us in the future.
Yeah, well, one thing's for certain. After the Dickerson trade, it kind of opens up a corner outfield spot. Say Polanco's not ready to go, or he comes out and plays some of next year and gets hurt.
Yeah.
Aniel Cruz, let's just say for this hypothetical situation, he starts next year in AAA. Polanco gets hurt middle of June. Aniel Cruz comes up and is the right fielder the rest of the way.
The dude's 6'6".
Yeah.
I mean, he's a big guy for playing shortstop.
But there's a chance that he'll be able to stick there. But you got Cole Tucker, you got Kevin Newman there, so the team can't play three players at one position. So,
and that's why I'm thinking of one thing, and that is in the future possibly making Kevin Newman your second baseman and having Cole Tucker come in at shortstop. It's just a thought, but if Newman is making it really hard to decide between him and Tucker, maybe decide between him and Frazier.
Yeah. And that would be the ideal defensive positioning. And then Frazier, who he could be on the trade block just depending on external value. He's a guy who's coming up for arbitration, so you just take a look at that. But as far as the Dickerson trade goes, let's just quickly touch on that. We touched on how it opens up a little bit of outfield flexibility. The team still has Melky on the roster, and obviously he didn't have much trade value. And he's a guy who I'm fine with keeping the rest of the year for the purpose of culture building. You've got a couple of guys in the locker room that are aren't good teammates and are tearing down the culture. Well, Melky's a guy who's building up the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have some young Hispanic players in that clubhouse that need a little bit of guidance when they're coming into the big leagues. Names that I can think of is Dario, Luis Escobar, guys like that who kind of just need to learn. Jose Osuna, guys who just kind of have to learn the league a little bit. Yeah, hopefully Aniel Cruz in the future.
But I don't think he'll ever be a big league teammate of Melky unless Melky decides to come back next year.
Well, yeah. Which, I mean, maybe, but maybe not in the same factor.
They associated in spring training, so hopefully that's good enough.
So, Dickerson goes to the Phillies for a player to be named later, which Josh thinks may be a draft pick.
I believe strongly that it is a draft pick. Okay. Depending on... that's all that makes sense at this point because Dickerson has played really good baseball, and he finished his stint with the Pirates so well. He's played really good baseball when he's been on the field this year. Not so great defensively, like he had a couple bad games defensively within the past few weeks, but that was just part of kind of the team's downturn. But he's the defending National League Gold Glove left fielder, and he's putting up another really solid offensive season. Nothing there to indicate that this guy doesn't have what it takes to get it done at the plate. He's hitting over 300 again. He's a good bad ball hitter. He doesn't walk much, but with 2 home runs yesterday, he's kind of displaying that power again. And the Phillies, they had a decent draft class this past draft this year, and it'll just kind of it may be conditional where the Pirates will have their pick, and it'll be conditional based on how Corey Dickerson plays the rest of the year for them. Like if they achieve a playoff berth, something like that, it'll be a better player that the Pirates will have to pick from. But I think it's a range of draft picks that they'll have their choice of to pick from the Philly system once those guys are eligible to be picked up and traded after the World Series. So, should we have done more at the trade deadline?
And another add-on question to this is, did we buy or did we sell? And it's kind of obvious, but we did sell.
Sold periphery pieces, expiring contracts.
And like we said, I mean, we only made 2 trades.
Yeah.
So it's not that big of a deal. But I feel like it's hard to say if we could have done more or not. Because how many players really have trade value on this team? I mean, sure, if Felipe Vasquez got traded to the Dodgers and we got Keibert Ruiz, Dustin May, and Gavin Lux, then that would have been crazy, but we didn't. And
Lux was the hang-up there. Lux and one other player would be enough for me to trade Vasquez and actually complete that trade. But it didn't happen. And other than Vasquez, there are players on this roster, one of which we just mentioned, Josh Bell, has significant trade value. Somewhere there's a team out there that feels like he is a absolute dynamite fit for the middle of their order.
Yeah.
And they did not pull the trigger for him at this deadline. I don't even know if Josh Bell was discussed, but Starling Marte was definitely available if teams wanted to call on him. But with the Pirates having kept him around, they could look to gauge his value in the offseason or just continue to move forward. Marte's a really good defender in center field, and he brings a lot to the table. So if the Pirates think they're going to be competitive next year, then Marte's going to be a part of that. Josh Bell could very well be a part of that. Felipe Vasquez, for now, could very well be a part of that, unless somebody really offers the Pirates something they can't refuse, a franchise-altering move. That's where the Pirates place the value on these guys that are the key pieces on their roster. Guys like Colin Moran. There's a couple teams out there that really like Colin Moran. Moran's having a nice season, but overall he's only an average to slightly above average third baseman. So he has a little bit of trade value, but I don't see anybody knocking down the door to add Colin Moran to their roster. Guys like Brian Reynolds and Kevin Newman, they both have trade value, but they're also almost in the untouchable category, as the Pirates see themselves as very close to being a contender in the coming seasons. So those guys you would keep around. Elias Diaz is a guy that I would shop, but only if you pull the trigger on a trade for Vasquez to the Dodgers that brought back a catcher. So that's what you're looking at with the Pirates, and they have a lot of pieces. Like they could move this guy if they move this guy, but it would all have to line up. It didn't all line up. They didn't get the Dodgers wouldn't budge on Lux. The Pirates kept Vasquez, and they did the right thing moving forward because they retained assets and did not let go of assets for less than what they wanted. They were kind of in the driver's seat, and they did exactly what they should have done given the situation. So, you ready to talk about Dario?
Yeah, so Josh said that Dario might be the next Trevor Williams, which is an interesting thing to think about, because Williams, not a very highly regarded prospect, but he comes in and he does great, and then now he's our 2 or 3. So Dario has been pretty decent, and today he got pulled, in my opinion, a little bit too early, And last time out, he didn't have that great of a start. But how do you feel about Dario?
Yeah, so this is my estimation on Dario's skill set. I made the comparison to Trevor Williams because the stuff is relatively similar. His sinker has a little bit more movement than we saw in the early going for Trevor Williams, but he's similar height and weight, so similar profile as a player. Very much a decently regarded mid-level prospect coming up through the system. Trevor Williams may have been a better prospect than Dario is, but Dario is he's the son of a former big leaguer, so that gives him the pedigree, kind of the belief that he belongs at the big league level, the confidence needed to kind of go out there and attack from day one. So the difference between Dario and, say, a guy like Chris Archer. Archer either falls behind and gets hit hard when he gets hit hard, or he gets ahead and ends up picking at the zone and walking a guy. Dario doesn't really seem to worry about results. And against the Mets in a decent-sized ballpark, he got hit pretty hard. He gave up, 3 home runs?
Yeah.
So today against the Reds, everyone felt like it was a repeat performance of that, okay? But it really wasn't. It was 2 wall scraper home runs in a very small ballpark.
Yeah.
If you looked at the StatCast, it was like, this is a home run in 1 of 30 or 2 of 30 ballparks. Pop-ups that get out of the yard, I'm not going to hold that against Dario. He actually missed some bats today. He had 5 strikeouts in 3 2/3 innings, and he gave up 6 hits, no walks. Okay, 2 of the hits arguably would be outs in any other ballpark. Okay.
Rollers.
Most any other ballpark, I'm just going to say. Maybe at PNC, both of them were to left field. So yeah, at PNC they're definitely outs. I was going to say like a high fly to right might catch the Clemente wall and prevent it from being caught. But both of those balls are easy outs with Reynolds or Dickerson playing left field at PNC. So the kind of Trevor Williams comparison that I draw is Dario comes out and attacks. He doesn't worry about his stuff getting hit. And because he attacks, he's then pacing the game. So a little bit here and there, ahead in the count, he's thrown too good of a pitch. And that's what happened on the Suarez pop-up wall scraper home run today. The pitch was a little bit too good. So he still needs to figure out what's going to be the way he effectively leaves the zone. Against righties, if he's not pitching backwards, that's going to be the slider moving away from him. His changeup is playing up, and his sinker, a couple of times today, he got strikeouts looking. One against Votto, where the sinker started in off of the plate. One of them ended up right down the middle to a left-handed batter, and the one to Votto just caught the corner. So that was a perfectly placed sinker that came back to the corner, and Votto was like moving his front hip out of the way, thinking that he might get hit with the ball. And the other left-handed hitter may have been Jeanette. I forget exactly who it was who took the called third strike. But he was also looked uncomfortable with that front left hip, or right hip. But he looked uncomfortable with the front hip, with the ball coming in at him, and the Reds are just a little bit uppity about being thrown at right now. So
yeah, especially when he hit Winker.
Yeah,
they were probably like, "Oh my goodness, here we go again." I mean, the spot was up; he just missed.
Yeah,
it's not that big of a deal.
So the answer here is Dario is good, and expecting him to fall off the face of the earth probably isn't reasonable. he went through a long stretch of starts where his strikeout rate was like invisible, but the last couple of starts he's actually been striking out some batters.
Yeah.
But being victimized by the home run ball, it wasn't quite the results that he was looking for. But today the results could have been so much different, and I don't think Dario's too worried about giving up a few home runs here and there. He's going to come out and attack again next time he takes them out.
Yeah.
So this guy, he's got a chance to be in the rotation moving forward, and that's huge because it's really hard to tell who the Pirates are going to have in the rotation moving forward. It would be nice if Chris Archer would finish up the season strong and be able to be traded this offseason going into the final 2 years of a somewhat team-friendly deal. That way you would get that situation out of the clubhouse and move forward with a younger player. And ideally, next year, just to follow up on Mitch Keller,
Yep. We can go.
you have Keller and Tyone as your absolute high-end talent that could be the top two in your rotation. Then you've got Musgrove, Dario, Williams in the mix for the other rotation spots. So that's best case scenario. Brault, he has really earned a look at the 5 starter because he really came into his own this season and kind of carved out something that looks like he may have a future in the big leagues in a starting rotation. So Brault, with that nice stretch of starts before he went on the injured list, he's kind of let the Pirates know he's still going to be included in their future plans. So now the Pirates go in, like, we're at the trade deadline, but it's like this season, there's nothing left to play for in this season.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to 2020. And they go into 2020 where it feels like, okay, the offense might be a strength, and the pitching, it's a lot of question marks.
Yeah.
Well,
different from last year.
Yeah, just the way it's probably going to play out. I'm just going to make
Yeah.
a bold prediction right now. The pitching staff will reestablish themselves, and the offense may disappoint a little. But that would just be the disappointing middling cycle that we've seen. So hopefully some guys break out, continue their breakouts offensively, and keep it going because the Pirates could use a little bit of power here and there. A guy like Will Craig could help with that.
Yep.
I know Jung Ho Gung has been getting some at-bats because of his power. So that's what we're looking at. But as far as things go, what we want to wrap up the podcast with, we're going to talk about 2 guys that we hinted at throughout the podcast.
Yes.
Who are kind of troublemakers for this team.
And they were both acquired last year at the deadline.
Yeah. Yep.
Keone Kela and Chris Archer.
New blood. These guys are boys, okay? And both these guys have electric stuff, okay? Kela has come back and in very low pressure situations looked like a dynamite pitcher, okay? So what I'm going to bring into this argument is just, it's going to kind of show that both of these guys are kind of selfish when, as a part of a baseball team, you need to be somewhat selfless in order for the team to function at max capability. So Archer and Kela are distinguished this year because they are the only 2 pitchers on the Pirates roster to have thrown at Derek Dietrich. Okay? Derek Dietrich has hit somewhere between 7 and 10 home runs off of Pirates pitchers this year. And I believe each and every one of them was off of a different pitcher on the Pirates staff. Okay? So this guy has 19 home runs. A big chunk of them have come against the Pirates, okay?
Yep.
And off of each and every one of them being a different Pirates pitcher who surrendered the home run. Rich Rod, Kingham, all of these guys, all these different guys. Was it... I'm trying to think. Lyles gave up one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's what we're looking at. He celebrated each and every one of his home runs like he had just walked off Game 7 of the World Series.
Yep.
Archer was the only player up until Kela last night who really took offense to his antics. Everybody else retained a calm demeanor of professionalism and just moved forward with, hey, I gave up a home run, next batter. Archer had to throw at Dietrich his next time up, and that caused the first benches clearing brawl where Puig got photographed. It looked like he was trying to take on the whole team. That sparked the first benches clearing brawl, and if you recall, Marte actually was questioned by Puig leading up to that inning, and he actually told Puig
he told Puig that it was going to come,
that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Marte was photographed nonchalantly observing the brawl as it kind of quieted down. Okay, Archer was targeted and knocked like a twig or a feather to the ground last night in the brawl when Amir Garrett went after the Pirates dugout.
Trevor.
And a few other Reds came running over there to try and cause some mayhem. So,
including their manager,
yeah,
saying.
Archer took the brunt of I think it was Amir Garrett that blasted him. So, obviously the Reds don't like Archer, and Archer has kind of brought that on himself by his immature response to Dietrich's celebration of his home runs the first time around. So Archer, just being a selfish player, kind of wanting to do whatever he feels like, has kind of brought down the brotherhood culture in the Pirates clubhouse, where going into this season it felt like a very close group. Now Kela is back. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
First day back, he gets into an altercation with a coach or instructor in the clubhouse, and he gets a 2-game suspension.
It wasn't a coach; it was some sort of staff member.
Yeah.
And feeding off of that really quick, the bullpen coach got suspended, and I have a theory. I think that he said something to the same staff member because of his bullpen mate getting suspended for it. So our coach is now suspended. Well, not anymore, but yeah. So first day back, he has some trouble, and it's just been like, even yesterday he was causing issues in the fight and everything. He was just, I don't know, he's been acting like a troublemaker.
Yeah, he has an attitude, and it's a bad attitude. It's noteworthy because it's just not the culture that the Pirates want. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not conducive to team winning. When somebody thinks they're above the rest of the team and they can just go do whatever they feel like, okay. And this guy, before his injury, okay, even though he's pitching well right now in all these low pressure situations, before his injury, he contributed to multiple bullpen meltdowns, and everybody, like, some of the fans turned on him. I felt bad for him because, like, he just couldn't seem to get it done. Ends up throwing a pitch in a bad spot, and he's got electric stuff. But the guy is overrating himself, first of all, and then he's got a bad attitude. Looks down on his teammates. Any teammate that doesn't have the natural talent that he has is just not on his level. He hangs out with Archer, and Archer and Kela are causing trouble, like bringing their teammates into this battle that they chose to involve themselves in because this guy who isn't very classy himself chose to celebrate his home run. So either way, that kind of has brought down the culture of the Pirates, and Archer leading the way out of the All-Star break and the way he folded in the 7th inning at Wrigley coming out of the break, that kind of has set the tone for the second half. This guy isn't fully responsible for the Pirates' downturn, but the expectations that surrounded both he and Kela, that's what I said coming into this season is, why would the Pirates add Archer and Kela if they're just going to finish the same way they finished last year? Well, the answer is they somehow got it wrong culturally, and they brought in two guys that kind of poisoned the locker room.
What is up with Pittsburgh teams and bad attitudes?
Well,
I mean,
it's kind of been a theme recently, but the key is to find a way to move on and kind of see what you can do to move past the era of time where those guys were with the team and try and maximize the asset as best you can. Yeah. But it's another situation where you're going to get just cents on the dollar in trading either of these guys, and there's a chance if these guys go to a team where they no longer feel like they have the voice, that they slide into a role where they're a solid contributor as a role player. But in Pittsburgh, they think they're the big man on campus, and it's not working. So
yeah,
that kind of wraps up our show. Did you have anything to add on that, Ryan?
I just got Madden 20, and I'm pretty hyped for the football season, so hopefully Sundays will be returning pretty soon. I don't know if we'll talk about the Steelers or not. Maybe not. Off-season stuff as well. But other than that, I mean, Neil Huntington has said, we are still in it. So that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys for listening to episode number 14. We will be back in a couple of weeks with episode number 15. Not quite sure what we will talk about, but we'll figure something out.
Yep.
Maybe prospects, something. But all right, so thank you all for listening, and we will see you later.